I'm going to read several verses, but right now at the opening here of my remarks, I'm going to just ask Brother Pettigo to touch with me Matthew chapter 24 and verse 4 and 5.
And Jesus answered and said unto them.
Now Jesus answered and said, he's talking to his disciples. He's trying to communicate with them about his will and purpose and some of the things that they are facing, some of the things they are being challenged by. Look at verse 3. He's on the Mount of Olives. His disciples came to him privately saying, tell us, when shall these things be? When are all these things going to come to pass? Shall there be a sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? And Jesus answered and said unto them,
take heed that no man deceive you.
Now, as you deal with this, Jesus said, be very careful. I do know that I've said many things to you. We've talked about lots of things.
For many shall come in my name.
The truth is that Jesus did not give them a really refined calendar, as it were, would you say? He didn't really give them a timeline that you could just measure. He said, and these things shall happen, and these things shall happen, and note this and note that, and be aware of this and be aware of that. But also be aware of something else. From now until the time when I come, and they could not, perhaps, we would guess that they could not have imagined that 2,000 years later we would still be talking about this moment. So Jesus said, from now until these things happen, I want you to know something else. Many shall come in my name,
saying, I am Christ.
And many will say, I am Christ. Now here comes the great challenge for us. What does it say next?
And shall deceive many.
And shall these men, these people that shall come and say, I'm a Christ, I'm a deliverer, I'm a Savior, I can help you with this, I can help you with that. Jesus said, and these liars, well, I'm putting the word liar in. These deceivers shall deceive many. Turn to somebody and say, deceivers shall deceive many. You may be seated. Well, now, that's a challenge. People are going to come in his name and they're going to deceive many. What am I to do? How am I to deal with this? This is a staggering thing. Jesus, this one who loves us and has watched over us and has given us the truth, and yet here he is saying to us, well, before I come, there shall be many who shall come and say that they are the Christ, and they shall deceive many. So you have to be very careful. Don't let anybody deceive you. Do we have any possibility of escaping deception? Many are going to be deceived. What does the next verse say?
Verse 11, and many false prophets shall rise.
Verse 11, and many false prophets shall arise.
And shall deceive many.
And shall deceive many. There it is again. We must not allow anybody to deceive us. Wouldn't you think that's a good idea? Just don't let anybody deceive you.
Right.
To make light of who you are and what you have in Christ. The old songwriter had it right, didn't she? When she said, blessed assurance. Now, when you think of this song, think of this concept, this idea. That here we have on the one hand, many deceivers. Everybody say many deceivers. And they shall be effective. They're not going to be just incapable deceivers. They shall deceive many. So they're going to be good deceivers. And they shall deceive many. And yet here the songwriter says, blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, for... Wait. wait. Blessed assurance. Blessed assurance. In the atmosphere of deception, when men are troubling others, when men are deceiving others, when Christ, the Redeemer himself, says, many shall be affected by these false teachers and these that come to deceive and destroy and to kill and to take advantage of you. And yet the songwriter says something else to us, reminds us of something else. That God's people need never to be deceived. Even though we walk in a valley of deceivers and all kinds of conflicts are coming against us, we can nevertheless say, in spite of all of these deceivers, I live with blessed assurance. Now the songwriter catches it this way. Blessed assurance. Jesus. Now here's the reason. Watch it now. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine. Help me now. Heir of salvation, purchased of God, born of the Spirit.
Born of His Spirit, washed in His blood.
What I'm going to try to get across to you today, there is absolutely no reason for us to be deceived. We'll come back to this song maybe. We'll come back to the thought for sure. Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. What are you talking about? Oh, what a foretaste. Something happened to me that prevented me from being susceptible. Put something around me, a protection, a guard, something that gave me strength and ability to be able to walk with my head up and with my heart set and my mind clear. Because it is not necessary for the church to be deceived. If we are deceived, it's because we allow our deception to happen through our lust and through our desires. Sometimes people want to please men so much that they will take a chance on the lie, just hoping that it will fit into their agenda, make things come out right. But you and I have an obligation. We have a responsibility to make sure, as Jesus is saying to us here. Verse number 4, he says, take heed that no man deceive you. That's your responsibility. Not too long ago, I found a little book. I was sharing this with students the other day when we were up in Grand Rapids. I was trying to point out to them how they could take a book, even though it might be a secular book as this is. The title of which is The Phantom Islands. I thought maybe I bought it in Greece, but I was looking through and I'm not sure I did. I think I bought it here in the United States somewhere. But I've had it a while, had it just kind of set aside, and I keep thinking about the title because it really intrigued me. It's called Phantom Islands. So I was saying to the students and the young ministers, I was saying, you know, there's an interesting thought right there. I'd never preached it. I just had this book laying around. And I said, someday I'm going to get into that and find out what it's about. I knew a little bit from reading the introduction and the other parts of it that it was about these islands that never existed. Beware lest any man deceive you. Let no man deceive you. This is about deception. It's about an interesting time, the age of discovery, when the whole world was exploding with the excitement over new information. People were discovering, Europeans particularly, were discovering new lands, taking great adventures, voyages into the deep. 71% of the world is covered with water. That's amazing. 98 or 97% of that water is in the oceans. Massive, massive oceans. So that means about 68% of the world or so is ocean, not just water. If you took out all the rivers and it took out all the lakes, the Great Lakes, everything. and you just look at the vast oceans, that within itself represents 68% or so of the world's surface. Imagine men taking ships without motors, navigating into the deep, and they had no electronic help. They had no way to really determine actual position. In fact, they could sail by latitude, but longitude was impossible. Latitude was pretty easy because they could sail just by the sun and the moon, and that's how they did it for many, many years. They had to stay lined up with the heavenly elements, but they couldn't determine their exact location without time. Longitude was hard to come by, and finally they were able to figure out a way. It was clear up almost to the 1800s, 17 something, I don't know, 80 or 90, before they really got time. See, longitude was about time. You had to know the exact time of some port somewhere where you could figure out your exact position. So therefore they were sailing all those years without really knowing exactly. Latitudinally they could figure it out. They knew about where they were, and if they stayed lined up with the sun and the moon, they could find their way to some degree, but they didn't know exactly a precise point. Especially when they got out in those waters, they could not figure out, where is this? Where are we at? We kind of know we're on the path, but we don't know exactly where we are at. And these men sailed and accidentally mostly bumped into all kinds of islands all over the world, and especially up in the North Atlantic. They found all kinds of places, islands that nobody lived on, that were forsaken. And they brought back great and wonderful stories according to this book, which is well documented. It's a classic little book. Interesting. Hard to read, I must say. But nevertheless, it's interesting how these people got other people so excited. Why, they said, we sailed off into the blue. We went out across the sea and we discovered all of these great islands. And the kings would line them up and they would tell their stories at dinner time, and people would get all excited about hearing the adventures of the great explorers. And there's massive numbers of books written about this. Whole libraries in Europe filled with the stories of these explorers. Our own continent was discovered by people that came in ships, and some people say Vesputin was first, some say Columbus. We know Columbus certainly had the dough and had the connections with the little queen, so he probably gets more of the historical credit, but who knows actually. It was so exciting finding all this new stuff that people got into the business. See, the title of the book is Phantom Islands. So they were so desperate to succeed, so desperate to be in the circuit, to be in the banquet circuit, so desperate to be able to give their reports to the kings and the queens, the money people. Yes, we're going to finance the next journey, because they not only were finding islands, but they were finding gold, precious metals. They discovered peoples that they had never known before. Peoples that knew how to grow cotton and dye fabrics in a way that they had never seen before. They got excited about the prospect of commerce and money, and especially the dreams and the schemes that were being planned to gather the gold. And so it was easy to get people to invest. You say you're going to take a trip? You're going to find one of those islands? Yes. And you're going to bring us back gold? Yes, there's gold on those islands. And so these men with the ships raised large sums of money. And they sailed away. Men and women, in fact, sailed away. But you see, as time went on, to keep the money flowing, they invented islands. They came back with stories that were not true. Thus, Phantom Islands. They had an island called the Island of Demons. It was completely legendary. Jacques Cartier, he was a big-time operator. He financed a trip. They looked for different islands and came back with a wild story about an island full of demons.